Numbers. We're going to look at the German numbers 21 and above. Before we start with 21, let's just review some of the decades, the tens that we've already seen. Make sure you've reviewed those, or you can watch my video for 0 to 20. So for 10, we have 10. And for 20, we have 20. 20, if you think about the number 2, you might recall that the number 2 is zwei. And knowing that will help you remember 20. So this is the area that we're going to pay close attention to as we look at the rest of the tens places. So 10, 20, 30, 40. Now, one thing to note, of course, here, 30 does not have a Z, it has an S set, but otherwise sounds similar, both end in the IG. Notice 30, you have the 3, right? So 30, 40, so 4. Guess what 50 is? And 60. If you guessed 50, you'd be correct, because 5 is 5. 6, you just don't have that S. That's missing, so 60. Otherwise it'd be 60. That's too hard to say. So try these now. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. 7 is 7, but we're not going to have the EN, so 70. And then 8, 8, 80. 9, 90. And then 100, 100. So, look at these and repeat. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. 200, 200. And then 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. And then we get to 1,000, 1,000. Some really big numbers in German. Million. And then for English, a billion is a milliard. So this one's a little crazy. So, noch einmal. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000, Million, Milliard. So what about all the ones in between? So if we go from 20 to 30, what about 21 to 29? This is what happens in German. You're going to use the ones place and then the tens place. So 21. Ein. So think eins. Just drop the S. Ein und 20. 21. 1 and 20. 21. 22. 2 and 20. 22. What do you think 23 will be? If you said 23, you'd be correct. 3 and 20. 21, 22, 23. Up next, 24. Don't forget your joiner. And 25, 26, so the S is back again. 27, Ian's back. 28 und 29. So, wiederholt, repeat. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Just remembering that 30 is the only one that's got the S set. So, continuing on with that, now how would you say 31? So look at this pattern, 1 and 20. That means 31 is going to follow the same pattern, 1 and 30. So if you said 31, you'd be correct. And notice that that is correct because und ends in the D and then 30 starts with a D. So there are the two in a row. 32, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. So that's a little bit of how you would do with numbers.